woman looked at her and asked her, "What do you want?" "I want my husband to love me back," she swiftly answered, her voice cracking with sorrow. "Your 12 children is the price," the old woman said. Once upon a time, in a village called Uli, there was a beautiful maiden named Adeze. She was a stunning beauty with dark, vibrant hair and skin as smooth as silk. She had so much confidence and she carried herself like a queen. She was courting a man, Amadi, who happened to be the greatest warrior and farmer in the land. Every woman had a crush on him and envied Adeze. They said within themselves that she had everything any woman would want. Adeze loved children. She played with them, listened to them, and gave them lots of hugs and kisses. She couldn't wait to get married to Amadi so they could have their own children together. Few months later, Amadi married Adeze and they gave birth to 12 children. Despite the numerous children she had, her beauty never faded. If anything, it increased. One day, a war broke out between Uli and the neighboring village. Amadi, being a warrior, had to go to war. He fought with all his might, and at the end, they emerged victorious, but at the expense of Amadi's health. He had sustained a deep injury on his belly, which caused him to bleed profusely. His colleague rushed him to a herbalist, who tried different ways to sustain him, but all was futile. Instead, the pain worsened, making Amadi to groan in pain. There was no solution, so they had to take him to his home. Adeze was coming back from the market when she saw a lot of villagers surrounding a man lying helplessly on a mat in her compound. She wondered who it was, and to her very surprise, it was her husband. The basket of vegetables she had bought from the market escaped her hands to the floor, her jaw dropping. She fell to the ground and began wailing, calling to her husband. "Amadi!" she cried out. Amadi was groaning and wincing in so much pain. It was too much that the people surrounding him thought it best for him to die then than to live painfully and still die. Adeze couldn't bear the sight of it, so she ran to an old woman who was known to perform black magic. She was called a witch and no one associated with her. Adeze knew about this, but she was willing to go at any length to save her husband. After Adeze had arrived at the old woman's hut, she fell on her knees with tears flowing down uncontrollably. "My husband is dying! Please help him! I can't let him die! I promise to do anything!" she said. The old woman smiled at her and asked, "Anything?" "Yes, anything!" she replied, crying bitterly. The old woman looked at the sky, made some incantation for minutes, and then looked back at her. She said, "Your beauty is the price." Adeze was perfectly fine with it. She had thought that of what essence was her beauty when her husband's life is at stake. So she voiced out, "Take all my beauty, but please heal my husband." The old woman flashed a mischievous grin at Adeze and said, "Go back home. You will see your husband in perfect health. But as long as you live, he will remain in perfect health. But if you die, he would return back to his condition." Having heard this, Adeze stood, bursting in enthusiasm. Her entire body vibrated with so much excitement as she hurriedly sprinted to her home. Reaching there, she saw her husband standing on his 2 feet, hale and hearty. Anyone who didn't know about his previous condition would never guess that he was once critically ill. Every villager who had gathered around their hut was shocked. Amadi's colleague couldn't believe their eyes, and Adeze's children leapt with joy for the drastic miracle. Amadi's wounds had closed up neatly like he was never hurt. Adeze, seeing her healthy husband from a distance, ran to him, embracing him with all her might. She was very excited, and everyone celebrated with her. "My husband, you are healed!" she said in so much joy. "It seems like a miracle," Amadi said. He could remember the tormenting pain he had experienced in his entire body and was confused, yet happy that he couldn't feel an inch of pain anymore, and his wounds had concealed neatly. Adaeze smiled at her husband and whispered, "Don't worry. It will remain a miracle as long as I'm alive." Amadi didn't quite understand her statement, but he didn't bother to ask. He was way too thrilled to ask questions, so he waved it off. As months passed by, her looks began to deteriorate and her appearance less radiant. She noticed this, but didn't mind as long as her husband remained in perfect health. One night, Amadi tapped Adaeze awake from her slumber. He was unable to sleep and wanted to discuss something he deemed to be important. Reluctantly, Adaeze sat up to listen to her husband. She knew he only did this whenever he was troubled about something. "What is the matter, my dear husband?" she asked softly. Amadi cleared his throat, summoning the courage to reveal what was bothering him. After much delay, he finally spoke. "I want to marry another woman." Adaeze was shocked. She couldn't believe her ears that a day would come when she wasn't enough for her husband. "But why?" Her voice broke. All lingering desire to sleep disappeared from her eyes. "You are no more as beautiful as you used to. I need a beautiful woman as my wife," he replied. Adaeze was dumbfounded. Her husband didn't find her attractive anymore. She didn't know what to do, and so she remained silent. Amadi then continued, "My second wife will be coming tomorrow. I have already married her. I am just letting you know so that when she comes tomorrow, you will welcome her very well. Her name is Chidera. Good night," Amadi said, ending the conversation as he laid back on the bed. The sudden news was more than Adaeze could process. It was too much to handle. She remained silent and cried herself to sleep. The next day, Chidera packed into their home, and Adaeze wondered when her husband had gotten married to Chidera without her noticing. Perhaps she was too busy with her 12 children that she hardly noticed. She had observed that rich men in the village had more than one wife, so she thought that perhaps it wasn't so bad after all. She accepted her fate and helped Chidera back into their house. Chidera had a youthful beauty that made Amadi shower her with so much affection, deserting Adaeze. Adaeze was pursued from Amadi's room to a different hut in the compound, and Chidera took her place. Amadi would spoil Chidera with so much gifts and neglected Adaeze and her 12 children. One day, her firstborn, Obiageli, fell ill. Adaeze begged Amadi for money so she would take her child to a physician. But Amadi always gave excuses. On a fateful day, Adaeze caught Amadi giving Chidera a huge sum of money to buy new clothes. Enraged, Adaeze walked up to Chidera and snatched the money from her hand, saying that it would be more than enough to treat her child. Chidera shouted at Adaeze and gave her a resounding slap that amazed Amadi. She then forcefully acclaimed back the money. Adaeze broke down into tears. She was angry that her husband, Amadi, didn't say anything. So she looked at him and said, I told you that our first child is terribly ill. I needed money to take her to a doctor in the village. But here you are, giving her this huge amount of money. As if that wasn't enough, you stood there and watched her slap me and you said nothing. Amadi then replied, what did you expect? You took her money. How will an owner watch a thief take her money and keep quiet? Adeze's heart broke into pieces. So you are calling me a thief, Amadi? You just acted like one, he replied. Adeze couldn't bear the shame anymore, so she ran out of the hut to the old woman who performed black magic, wailing bitterly in her presence. The old woman looked at her and asked her, what do you want? I want my husband to love me back, she swiftly answered, her voice cracking with sorrow. Your 12 children is the price, the old woman said. Adaeze paused her sob and looked at the old woman, hoping that she must have misheard her. I don't understand, she said, sniffing. Your 12 children have to die to get back your husband's love for you, the old woman said. Adaeze was taken aback. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. She loved her children enormously and couldn't imagine living without them. So she said, please, there has to be another way. There is no other way, the old woman answered. Adaeze wanted to bring herself to leave the old woman's hut, but it felt like her feet were fastened to the ground. She couldn't move back to the house where she is neglected by her husband and his second wife. She wanted her husband only to herself and was determined to do anything to get him back. Take my children, she said with trembling lips. She couldn't believe she had to sacrifice her children for her husband's love. It is done. Your children will be taken one by one. And once they are all taken, your husband will love you again, she said, and entered her hut as Adaeze broke into tears. She couldn't believe what she had done. She feared returning to see any of her children dead. Soon, after bawling her eyes out, she got up and went back home. However, she was welcomed with a terrible news that her sick child had died. She fell to the ground and wept some more, rolling to the ground. The rest of her children and some passing villagers who heard the news consoled her. Gradually, her children died one by one until none was left, and suddenly, Amadi's love for Adaeze returned. Chidera now became the wife that was neglected. Adaeze hated her so much and used every opportunity she had to maltreat Chidera. Chidera didn't understand the strange deaths that had occurred to Adaeze's children. Neither did she understand how Amadi would change drastically. She sorted for answers, so she went to a blind seer who lived in the forest. As she stepped into the blind seer's territory, he spoke. Your husband, Amadi, is in a black magic love potion, and the prize was the life of Adaeze's 12 children. Chidera was consumed with fear. She couldn't believe what she had just heard, so she ran to the palace to meet the king, explaining to him what the seer had told her. The king was surprised and taken aback, so he called for Adaeze. Amadi followed Adaeze, wondering why the king requested to see his wife. When she had gotten to the palace, she saw Chidera staring at her dreadfully and wondered what had happened. Evil woman, tell the king why you killed your 12 children. Chidera lauded, and Adaeze fell to the ground, knowing fully well that her secrets have been exposed. She confessed all her deeds and the reason behind them. Hearing them, Amadi staggered backward. He was so surprised. He didn't know whether to feel angry or remorseful because he was the reason behind her actions. The king then declared that she would be beheaded for committing such an abomination. The news spread like wildfire in the village, and on the appointed day, Adaeze was beheaded. On that same day, Amadi became terribly ill as painful deep sores, which happened to be even much more bigger than it were before, appeared on his body. Chidera left him that same day, and Amadi regretted his actions. He lived his entire life in excruciating pains and guilt for what he had done to Adaeze until he died. Dear lovely viewers, this is the end of this story. I believe that this story has a lot of lessons. So do comment one of the moral lessons you learned in this story in the comment section. Also, don't forget to hit that notification button so you don't miss out on all the interesting stories I will be posting. Don't forget to stick around. See you in my next story.